There is a man in your life who is not confused because he doesn't care. He is confused because he cares more than he is ready to admit, even to himself. And that is where everything starts to get complicated. Because when a man feels something real, something deeper than just attraction, his behavior does not always become clear. It becomes unstable. One day he is present, engaged, almost close enough to feel safe, and the next day he pulls back like something inside him just hit a wall. And you start asking yourself the wrong question. You think, did I do something wrong? But the truth is far more interesting than that, because this is not about you doing less or more. This is about what happens inside a man when emotions start touching places he has never properly dealt with. Suddenly, it is not just about liking someone. It becomes about pressure, about fear of not being enough, about timing that doesn't feel perfect in his mind. And instead of talking about it, he goes quiet. Not because he lost interest, but because he is trying to understand his own feelings without losing control of them. And this is where most women get stuck emotionally. They start reading distance as rejection, silence as absence, confusion as lack of interest. But in reality, sometimes distance is just a man trying to balance what he feels with what he can handle. So what looks like mixed signals from the outside is actually internal conflict from the inside. And here is the truth you need to hear clearly. When a man is emotionally overwhelmed by what he feels for you, he does not always move closer immediately. Sometimes the first sign of real emotion is not action, it is hesitation. This is where the real confusion starts, because from the outside it looks simple. He likes you or he doesn't. But inside a man's mind, it is rarely that simple. He can feel a strong pull towards you, a kind of emotional attraction that shows up in small things, like the way he remembers details about you, the way he looks at your messages more than once, or the way he suddenly becomes more attentive when you are around. It is not casual. It is not random. There is something real there. But the problem is, feeling something deeply and knowing what to do with it are two completely different things. He might be going through a phase where his life is not fully balanced. Maybe he is focused on work, personal pressure, past emotional baggage, or just not in a stable mindset to build something serious. So when he feels that connection with you, it does not automatically turn into action. Instead, it creates a conflict inside him. One part of him wants closeness, wants to explore you, wants to be near you more often, but another part of him is telling him to slow down, to be careful, to not jump into something he is not fully ready to handle, and that internal fight creates inconsistency in his behavior. That is why you might see him very warm at one moment and suddenly distant the next. It is not always about losing interest. It is about emotional capacity. Because attraction alone does not decide how a man behaves, his mental state does. If his mind is not settled, his emotions cannot turn into stable actions. So even if he genuinely feels something for you, he might still hesitate to move forward clearly. And this is where many women misunderstand the situation. They think clarity should automatically follow feelings. But in reality, some people feel first and understand later. He may not even fully understand what you mean to him yet. He just knows that you are different. You stay in his thoughts longer than expected, and that alone makes him careful. Because when something starts feeling real, it also starts feeling risky to him. So what you are seeing is not a lack of emotion, it is unmanaged emotion. And until he becomes emotionally stable within himself, his feelings for you will exist in a mixed form, real but not fully expressed, strong but not fully shown. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of a man's behavior in love. From the outside, it may look like he is simply being distant, inconsistent, or unsure about you, but inside something very different is happening. He is not just thinking about you, he is also thinking about what happens to him when he starts feeling too much. Because for many men, emotions are not just feelings, they are something that challenges their sense of control. And control is something they rely on more than they admit. When he starts getting emotionally attached, even in small ways, he begins to notice changes in himself. He thinks about you more than he planned to. He gets distracted during his day. He checks his phone when he knows he shouldn't. And instead of enjoying these feelings fully, a part of his mind starts questioning them. Why is this happening so fast? What if I lose focus? What if I get hurt? These questions don't always make sense logically, but emotionally they feel very real to him. So what does he do? He pulls back a little. Not because the feelings are fake, but because the intensity is unfamiliar. He is trying to regain balance. Because when emotions start feeling stronger than his control, he becomes careful. He slows things down. He becomes unpredictable. He may not text as much, or he may suddenly become quiet. Not because he stopped caring, but because he is trying to stabilize himself internally. This is also where vulnerability plays a big role. Feeling deeply for someone means opening a part of himself he may not be fully comfortable exposing. It makes him feel exposed, emotionally visible, and that can be uncomfortable if he is not used to it. So instead of leaning in, he sometimes steps back just to feel grounded again. And this is why his behavior becomes confusing. Because emotionally, he is not gone. He is just trying to control the intensity of what he feels. It is like standing too close to something powerful and needing a step back just to breathe properly. So what looks like distance is often not disinterest. It is emotional self-management. He is not running away from you. He is trying not to lose control of himself while still feeling you strongly in his thoughts. Sometimes a man doesn't just meet a woman. He meets a feeling that changes the way he sees himself. And this is where things start to feel different for him, because you are not just another connection in his life. You feel unfamiliar in a quiet, emotional way, not loud, not dramatic, but deep enough to stay in his mind longer than he expected. And when something feels new at that level, it doesn't always create immediate action. It creates reflection. He starts noticing that being around you feels different. The way you talk, the way you respond, the way you carry yourself emotionally, it all creates a kind of impact he cannot easily label. It is not just attraction anymore. It is something that makes him think about life, about relationships, about his own emotional readiness. And when a man starts thinking like that, he doesn't always move forward quickly. He pauses, not because he is uninterested, but because he is processing something that feels important. You might be representing a version of connection that feels more real, more calm, or more emotionally honest than what he is used to. And that can be both beautiful and uncomfortable for him at the same time. Because anything that feels different in a meaningful way also forces him to look at himself. Questions start coming into his mind. Am I ready for this kind of connection? Can I be consistent with this kind of person? Do I understand what I'm feeling, or is it too much too soon? And this is where the complication grows. Because now it is not only about how he feels about you, it is also about how he feels about himself when he is with you emotionally. You are not just part of his life anymore. You are part of his self-awareness. And not every man is immediately prepared for that kind of emotional depth. So instead of rushing in, he studies the situation silently. He observes. He tests his own feelings without even realizing it. He tries to understand whether what he is feeling is temporary excitement or something deeper that might require responsibility, consistency, and emotional maturity. And that is why his behavior may feel slow or uncertain. Because when something starts to feel meaningful on a deeper level, it does not always create fast movement. Sometimes it creates hesitation. Not because it is weak, but because it feels real enough to be taken seriously. This is one of the most confusing parts of the entire situation, because from your side, you are looking for consistency. You want his actions to clearly match what he seems to feel. But inside his mind, things are not moving in a straight line. They are split into different directions at the same time. One part of him is emotionally drawn to you, genuinely interested, even thinking about you more than he admits. But another part of him is constantly analyzing, questioning, and trying to stay in control of the situation. And when a person is mentally divided like this, their behavior becomes inconsistent. So what you experience is not a clear yes or no. It is a mix. One day he is warm, present, and emotionally available in small ways. He may show care, attention, or a level of closeness that feels real. But then suddenly, there is a shift. He becomes quieter, slower to respond, or emotionally distant. And this shift is what creates confusion, because it feels like something changed, but in reality, nothing external changed. The conflict was always internal. His emotional side wants connection. It wants to move closer, to explore what he feels, to see where this bond can go. But his logical side is stepping in at the same time, trying to slow everything down. It is asking questions like, is this the right time? Am I ready for something serious? What if I cannot maintain this? What if I disappoint her later? And these thoughts don't stop his feelings, but they definitely slow down his actions. This is why his behavior looks unpredictable. It is not because he is playing games or trying to confuse you on purpose. It is because his emotional world and his mental world are not aligned yet. When alignment is missing, consistency naturally disappears. So instead of a steady flow, you get waves. Moments of closeness followed by moments of distance. And here is the important part to understand. Inconsistency is not always equal to dishonesty. Sometimes it is equal to internal conflict. He is not fully decided within himself, so he cannot give you a fully stable direction. He is still trying to figure out what this connection means in his life and what role he is able to play in it without losing balance. So from the outside, it looks like mixed signals. But from the inside, it is a man trying to balance emotion and logic at the same time without having clarity yet on which one should lead. Because uncertainty creates anxiety, and anxiety makes you want answers immediately. But emotional reality doesn't always reveal itself on your timeline. If what he feels is genuine, it will not simply vanish just because there is distance, silence, or confusion in the early stages. Real feelings don't usually die quickly. They evolve. They either grow into something more stable, or they slowly become clear in direction. But they don't just disappear without leaving traces behind. When a man is truly affected by a woman on a deeper level, the connection doesn't stay static inside him. Even if he is not expressing it openly, it continues to exist in the background of his thoughts. He remembers moments, he replays conversations, he notices your absence more than he expected, and even when he tries to focus on other things, that emotional impression stays somewhere in his mind. That is what real connection does. It lingers. But here is the important truth you need to understand. Growth requires space, and clarity requires time. If he is confused, emotionally unstable, or still learning how to process what he feels, then forcing answers in the middle of that confusion doesn't create clarity. It creates pressure. And pressure usually pushes people further into silence, not closer into understanding. So what looks like distance is sometimes just the space needed for emotions to settle into direction. Over time, one of two things usually happens. Either he becomes more stable within himself and starts showing you consistent effort, clearer intention, and emotional presence, or he slowly reveals through his actions that he is not capable of giving you the consistency you deserve. And both outcomes are actually forms of clarity, even if they come slowly. The mistake many people make is trying to decode every small behavior in the middle of uncertainty. But emotional truth is not found in isolated moments. It is found in patterns over time. If someone genuinely values you, their behavior eventually aligns. Not instantly, but gradually. And if they don't, that pattern also becomes clear eventually. So instead of getting lost in overthinking every pause or every silence, the healthier perspective is this. Real connection does not need to be forced into existence. It either develops naturally with time, or it reveals that it was never meant to become stable. And in both cases, time becomes the thing that brings honesty into the situation. So when you look at this whole situation, don't rush to label it too quickly. Don't call it love, don't call it confusion, and don't call it rejection based only on moments that feel unclear. Because what you are really dealing with is a process, not a final answer. A man can feel deeply, care strongly, and still struggle to express it in a stable way. And that struggle often looks like distance, mixed signals, or silence, but underneath it, there can still be real emotion trying to find direction. But here is something just as important to understand. Your peace should never depend on decoding someone else's emotional confusion forever. If he is real, his actions will eventually show it. If he is not ready, that will also become clear with time. Either way, You don't lose anything by staying grounded in your own self-respect, your own clarity, and your own emotional balance, because love is not supposed to keep you stuck in constant guessing. It is supposed to grow into something stable, something you can feel without anxiety, something that adds clarity to your life instead of confusion. And if it doesn't do that, then it is not something you chase. It is something you observe from a distance until truth becomes visible. So don't chase answers in chaos. Let time do what it always does, reveal intention. And in that process, focus more on your own emotional strength than on his uncertainty. Because the moment you stop overreading confusion, you start seeing reality more clearly. If this message made sense to you, then stay connected, because the next truth might help you understand even deeper patterns that most people never notice in relationships.